Well, ladies and gentlemen, the next person coming to the stage is a wonderful stand-up comic who's performed all over the place. She has a movie coming out called Fred and Vinny, and it's a movie that's been around the festivals and doing quite well, and it's a pleasure to have her here. Will you please welcome Ms. Harriet Rose?
Wow, that was nice. That was beautiful. Thank you. Comedy Callback. I'm still serving. The first person I think of, like over 20 years ago, Maury, a comic who only had one good joke. He would get up, he'd say, "The only girls I can get are my mother's friends." That always killed me, and that was his only good joke. God bless Maury. I mean, some people, it's really funny, they bomb the first time they're on stage. I didn't. First joke, Eagle Tavern, New York City. You remember? My first joke. I just broke up with my boyfriend. He was a medical doctor. He should have been the lawn doctor. He was so full of shit. When I first started, I only had 5 minutes of memorized material. All that I wrote sitting on my parents' couch. But, you know, it's so funny because I didn't know how to, at the time, I didn't have the confidence to improvise. I was so stiff. I could never, I'd go up to the mic and for some odd reason, I couldn't move my shoulders or my arms. I was like Robo Harriet. I mean, it was just crazy. And my second gig, I was booked at a gay club in Greenwich Village. Now, there was only men, and I get on stage with my 5 minutes of just memorized material, and I was oblivious to the audience. I started. How many of you girls have ever gone to see male strippers? I went to a bachelorette party, and I'm telling you, you girls are worse than the guys. Yelling and screaming. I says, one woman actually stood up on a chair and started screaming, "Show me some beef! Show me some beef!" I couldn't take it. I said, "Sit down, Mom." They roared. I mean, they were just, and they invited me back. They thought I was fearless. I mean, they didn't know that's all the material I had. The next thing was, in the adult comedy world, is dealing with hecklers. And my first time was, I was doing a happy hour club on Wall Street. And there was this big drunk guy in a suit that every time a comic would come up, he would start interrupting. So I take the stage, and the first thing he says is, "Okay, lady, we'll see if you're funny." I says, "Okay, sir, we'll see if you're smart." And then we kept going back and forth and back and forth. And finally I said to him, I says, "Okay, sir, I want to know, what do you do for a living?" And he stands up. He says, "I'm a banker." I says, "Okay, the men's room's that way. It's time to make a deposit." He shut up. I was able to do the rest of my act. And it was so funny because at the time, you know, as a kid, I never had any kind of confidence. And for that moment, I just, my whole confidence soared. I felt like buying a cape. And then I moved to LA to become rich and famous. Okay, that's the next thing. First big audition in LA. Looking for comic to MC elite strip club. I go in, dressed to the nines, in my mini dress and my pearls, thinking with all the commercials and some other venues I've done, people must know me. I'm kind of a famous comic. But I mean, that was just in my own mind. I was like overconfident. But not knowing, and I gotta tell you guys, not knowing for one moment, I had gone on the wrong day. They were auditioning strippers. Okay, there were two men sitting in a booth smoking cigars. One looked at me and said, "Take the stage." I walk on stage and he looks at me and he goes, "Name?" I go, "Harriet Rose." He goes, "Okay, Harriet, what kind of act do you have?" I thought he was being sarcastic with me. I says, "Well, I try to make him laugh." Then he looks at me and goes, "Well, what kind of music do you use?" And I says, "Well, I don't need any music." Then he looks at his friend and goes, "You must have a hell of an act." Just start. So I do. I go, "My mom's a hypochondriac." I call her up. She answers the phone. "Ow, who is it?" He looks at me and goes, "You're not a stripper." I says, "No, I'm a comic." He says, "We're seeing comics tomorrow." And he goes, "You know, you're really funny." Then he looks me up and down and he goes, "You know, strippers make more money."
Harriet Rose. You know, most stand-up comics would have just kept on going with the stripper audition because stage time is stage time. You know, it's when they can. I mean, I do that whenever the police helicopter flies out over the top of my apartment building. I usually run out and do 5 minutes in the spotlight real quick.